let's get into it. Maybe the all-time scumbag move. Is that what we're talking about? It happened in college baseball. This is one where I don't think everybody can agree on anything. This may be the one thing that everybody agrees on, but then you have the University of Texas Longhorn fan base that maybe sees nothing wrong with what has transpired over the last 48 hours, Monty. But college baseball has gotten everyone's eye on loyalty, the truth, and so much more.
You hit it right on the money. You're right. The Longhorns are like, what? It's business. This is how it works. It's sports. Everyone else is like, no, that was a douchey move done by the coach, like from beginning to end, all of it. I can't even believe how quickly it all really went bad. It went terrible in a matter of what? 24 hours, if that?
Yes, and it went bad because of what happened on Monday night. And for those that may not know exactly what we're talking about, the University of Texas today hired Jim Schlossnagle as their new head coach of their men's baseball program, their baseball program in Austin. He comes over from Texas A&M, where just 48 hours ago they were prepping for a Game 3 in the College World Series in Omaha against Tennessee, playing for a national championship. But it's what Schlossnagle said after the loss to Tennessee that grabbed a lot of headlines and now is even magnified more with his decision to leave the school today. If you need a refresher, that's what we're here for. This was Jim Schlossnagle on Monday when he was the head coach at Texas A&M.
I think it's pretty selfish of you to ask me that question, to be honest with you. But I left my family to be the coach at Texas A&M. I took the job at Texas A&M to never take another job again, and that hasn't changed in my mind. And that's unfair to talk about something like that. That'd be like you asking Montgomery if he's going to sign in the draft. But I understand you got to ask the question, but I gave up a big part of my life to come take this job, and I've poured every ounce of my soul in this job, and I've given this job every single ounce I can possibly give it. So write that.
You know, it's funny. I want to quick say something about that because yesterday this could have been brought up on our show, but I almost feel like it was the attack on the reporter. And sometimes in the media, I feel like we're more narrow-minded. We look at our own world. So while I can relate to maybe what the reporter is feeling, I don't know if anybody else can really relate to that. Mm-hmm. But there just seemed to be shots there were blatant shots taken at the question of the reporter. When if you actually took out those shots, Schlossnagle's answer actually probably would have sufficed for the question that was asked, but I just felt he was out of line in terms of the way that he treated the reporter who asked the question.
1,000%. And when I first heard it, I didn't know the details, right? And at this point, he hadn't left. He had just answered the question. And I was with you. I was like, he just lost. He's probably in like a bad mood, and he didn't mean to come off that mean. So I didn't even really think twice about it. But man, why did you have to lie so hard? Why did you have to cap on top of cap on top of cap? He like tripled down in everything he said. I took this job. I left my family. I never want to go anywhere else. Why did you say so much? Why did you answer like that? Because obviously it happened all in a matter of 24 hours. So we can only assume that this was something on the mind of yours and everybody around you that you had spoken to for more than 24 hours. But, like, why did you have to lie so hard in that moment? I feel like you easily could have dismissed the question where we maybe would feel a little bit differently of the decisions that you made and how you chose to go about this.
There was more cap. If there was more cap, there would have been a lids, right? That's my line. If there was more cap, you could have opened the lids, and that's what Jim Schlossnagle could have done with everything that he said in those comments.
Literally. We needed the big, those big hats that we saw him.
Yeah, noggin boss.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes. Like,
yes.
That's the type of cap that guy was doing. On top of, I just could not believe it. Why did you have to answer like that? I'm confused.
There are certain routes that I think that you have to take in that situation, and the route that he took in criticizing the reporter was not the route that you should have taken. A no comment would have opened it up to more speculation about what was actually going on. I'm not focused, but his comment of giving his dedication to Aggie land and Texas A&M at the time sounds like a commitment to Texas A&M.
Sounds like it? What are you talking? No, that's what he said.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not misconstruing what he said.
No, but we are, because he knew all along that he wasn't. It was a farewell letter. That was the problem with it, is that it wasn't this is my commitment to you. This is my dear John goodbye letter to you. And that is what he was saying, and that's laying the groundwork of it. And this isn't necessarily the first time. Nick Cope, our news anchor, who's the voice of UCLA baseball, so Nick is familiar with the collegiate baseball world. Schlossnagle's made his way around the Lone Star State previously as well.
Yes.
Nick?
So he was at TCU for a little while, and that's part of the connection with this whole thing. Chris Del Conte, the current AD at Texas, he's been there a couple years. He was at TCU for a while. So Del Conte and Schlossnagle go back a ways. And so that's why when David Pierce, who was in this position for Texas, and Texas's season ended weeks ago, so that's why this all blew up. On Monday, Pierce and Texas part ways mysteriously hours before the final game of the College World Series. Schlossnagle and Del Conte's connection, that's why that question even comes in the postgame, because of all that history.
Nothing had happened aside from the history for that question to pop up?
I think just rumors started circulating.
Okay.
As soon as the Texas job came open, his name was immediately connected.
Interesting.
There's also the scenario of it's a post-game press conference after they just lost a national championship game. And I understand how it may sound insensitive at the time of asking that question, but to Nick's timeline of the rumors that were out there, it's also the availability of the coach to ask a question. He's not going to be available the next day.
Right.
He's not going to be. So that is out there. So it is, that time is unfortunate of timing as it is. That is the time to ask the question. But there is also, this is nothing new. In fact, we touched on this a little bit yesterday with when Isaac was at the news desk, and Isaac brought up the Roy Williams comments that were made after they lost the national championship game in 2003 to Syracuse when he was the head coach at Kansas because the North Carolina job opened up. This was that exchange from Roy Williams speaking with Bonnie Bernstein that, quite honestly, is a part of TV history, because whenever you mention Roy Williams, you think of the greatness at Carolina, the greatness at Kansas, and then you also think of this interview.
Very understandably, you didn't want to address this issue during the week, but many people out there with the game over want to know what your level of interest is in the North Carolina job, Coach.
Bonnie, I could give a flip about what those people want. As a journalist, you have to ask that question. I understand that, but as a human being, that's all those people that want that answer to know right now, they're not very sensitive.
If they offer you the job, though, would you be willing to take it?
I haven't thought about that for 1 second. And the guy in your ear that told you have to ask that question, as a journalist, that's fine. But as a human being, that's not very nice, because it's not very sensitive. And I got to think that in tough times that people should be more sensitive. I could give about North Carolina right now. I've got 13 kids in that locker room that I love.
Coach, thank you.
That volcano was starting to bubble. You could see it building up. But the way Roy Williams handled it in the first part of the question was how it should have been handled. That's why Schlossnagle didn't need those comments to the reporter. Another part about this is, listen, Roy Williams was an assistant at North Carolina. He was an assistant under Dean Smith. That connection had always been there. They had just lost the national championship game. Obviously, you're hurt. But it's Kansas to North Carolina, two blue bloods. They aren't diehard rivals like Texas A&M and Texas are. So I'm not saying Kansas was okay with it at the time. They were obviously hurt. Bill Self coming there and continuing the winning tradition and winning national championships made things a lot better for Kansas and moving on from Roy Williams. But Roy Williams would go back and even go back to Lawrence at the time. So the exchange was not as volatile as this is when you have two rivals within the state. And one is considered the, I don't even want to say big brother. It's almost like mega corporation of Texas of what they are. And here Texas A&M with their loyal fan base and traditions and everything that comes with it being the second fiddle to Texas. Now you have your baseball coach leaving for that school. That's why this is also cranked up about 10 to 12 different notches.
I mean, it's super messy, and I really I like what you said, where it's like, I think we are all on the same page, and we really all agree that this really sucks. And then it just poses the question of where is loyalty going when it comes to sports? I feel like I've brought this up to you before. Bill Belichick, I was like, I feel like the Patriots have to be loyal to Bill because of what he's done. But loyalty, tradition, like you just mentioned, all of that is changing, and it's changing so quickly. And a big part is obviously money, NIL, transfer portal, all of that. But I just feel like tradition, loyalty, rivalries. I know this one, you believe it's now heightened. And yeah, you're right, this particular one. But the traditions of rivalries, it's like dying before our eyes.
Because guys are moving everywhere.
Quickly.
Girls are moving everywhere.
And I thought for a while it was just going to be more players. I know that he's not the first coach to do this. And you mentioned Roy Williams. You can even mention Nick Saban, right? LSU to Alabama. We can bring that one up. But this one hurts. This one, I'm not associated with any of these two teams, and I feel for the Aggies. I feel for them for how it all went down. But the bigger picture to me, again, I can't believe this is happening so quickly before our eyes, not just with players, but coaches as well.
I think the day that Saban was hired at Alabama, true story, was the day that LSU was playing in the Sugar Bowl. If we can confirm this, because I remember walking to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans and having LSU fans chanting Saban sucks when he had been in Miami with the Dolphins for 2 years, but then went to Alabama.
Right.
So to the point of the rivalries that you talk about is, absolutely true. I would say this. I think that the premise is correct in terms of, and Doug has talked about this. Doug has talked about just the player himself or herself of not being able to go back to your alma mater because you have 3 different schools that you've played for.
Yeah.
I do think in college there is still the brand of the overall brand of the school that no matter who is wearing the A&M or Texas uniform, they're still going to hate each other. Just like whoever wears Ohio State and Michigan, they're still going to hate each other because that fan base hates that other fan base. It's just a matter of who is who is wearing the uniform. And the other part of this is, honestly, if you're a coach, it doesn't matter. It just matters who signs your checks.
Yeah.
We think that maybe there are situations like Roy Williams wanting to go back to North Carolina. And there are dream jobs everywhere. Doug has talked about it. Doug's the head coach at Green Bay. He even said it in his opening press conference to be introduced as the head coach of the Phoenix of his love of Oklahoma State. And so that is there. That is out there. You have these ties. However, there's also the fact of you could be fired as a coach, and then you have to go find a new school, and then you got to jump a new school. And there are people who coach for 8 or 10 different schools. So the loyalty of your school is not as much to these people who are moving to jobs. And I think that's difficult for us to understand as fans because we look at A&M as the brand, Texas is the brand, and they look at it as like who signs my checks and what number is on that check.
Okay, so even with that, like if I'm a player, why would you want to go play for Schnoggel, whatever his name is?
Schlossnagle.
Never gonna. I don't want to say it right. I'm not gonna say it right on purpose. He doesn't deserve it. He keeps capping. He doesn't deserve it. Why would you want to go play for somebody like that? Doesn't he leave a bad taste in your mouth if you are a college baseball player?
I'm trying to think of the best way to put this in terms of. All right, let's just say your best friend started a sports radio network.
All right.
And she's like, Monty, I want you to come over here and work for us.
Sure.
And we're going to pay you more money. You're going to go, who's your best, name a friend. I don't.
Sure. Well,
okay.
Natalie.
Natalie Sports Radio. This thing is going to take off, and they want to bring Monty over.
Yeah.
And for as much as you love it here, you've had a relationship with her for 20 years.
Sure.
So that's what Schlossnagle is saying. Is like, I know the AD, and the players are saying, look, I know Coach. And if I stay at Texas A&M and a new coach comes in, maybe I'm not one of his guys, and he's going to want to bring in his guys. So I'm following the coaches. And that's why the transfer portal opens up. And it's not that these players are going to leave school. They may very well go to Texas. But when you're recruiting in college, it is about the relationships with the people. It's the one thing that you do have. It's so important. It's the bread and butter of everything. And if you don't have that relationship with the new coach, maybe you don't want to be there. And so you'd follow the coach to his new spot if he will have you. And that's why I think where the loyalty lies in this instance, it's different than maybe the real world, but it's individual with the coach or the coach that recruited you that may be an assistant on the new staff. So you go to that place. Those are all things that play into it.
Listen, you may make a good point here, Dan. I get the point. Pero the way he handled it was not the right way to go about it. I don't care that you have to do this so quickly because of the transfer portal and you got to secure your coaching staff as soon as possible. It was handled without class. And I get that. I understand what you're saying about like the relationship he has, and I get that. You're right. If I was here and Natalie had a new radio show and she was like, "Can you come?" I'd be like, "I'm gonna come, but I'm gonna do it the right way, and I'm gonna finish things out here properly, and I'm not gonna lie to the media and say this XYZ."
You would say, Natalie Sports Radio, can we do this like in 5 days?
Yes.
Can we let this breathe a little bit?
Exactly.
And that's the fault of Texas.
Yes.
And Texas wants to get this done. And by the way, Texas is going to show no empathy at all.
Well,
in
no, you
fact,
shouldn't
this
now.
is the trump card of them sticking at the Texas A&M, because you know what happens next week? Texas joins the league that Texas A&M was in. The Texas A&M left the previous league because they wanted to get away from Texas to join, and now Texas comes into that league. So it goes back to this rivalry and why it's so hated. My buddy Chris Gordy, who hosts and runs our affiliate in Houston, Sports Talk 790, tweeted out ticket prices for the A&M Texas football game that we're averaging at about $2,200 a seat right now because of this rivalry and how this adds up. And this is what this is all about. And so like if you're Texas, why have breathing room? Let's bring in our guy, let's pay him the money, and let's take him. And if it's against our most bitter, fiercest rival, even better. Let's do it quicker. They probably wish they could have done it in the post-game show on Monday. Right afterwards. They could have their own Texas banner in Omaha and introduced him at that time.
I mean, he could have just done that, and then maybe we would be like, at least he was upfront about it.
There is no right way to do it.
But he took the worst way to do it.
Yeah, that's Schlossnagle. that's Schlossnagle. I'm gonna
verb it up.
And we'll let him have the last word because he tried to cover up from the reporter and explain his words. We'll see if this sells you at all. This was Jim Schlossnagle today, now as the head coach at Texas.
Number one, what changed? And then number two, what would you say to those Texas A&M people that supported you that feels like that you intentionally misled them?
Well, I didn't intentionally mislead them, and that's a very fair question for you to ask because that is what I said. In that moment, that's exactly how I felt. I dove in with every single ounce of me to help A&M have the very best baseball program it can possibly have, and that investment lasted through the last pitch of the national championship game. It never wavered, not 1 second. I don't care what anybody says. All I can say is I have a career too. I have a personal life as well. I have goals, and I just simply felt like no negative at A&M, just the positives of the alignment and, frankly, my relationship with Chris, that I knew there wasn't anybody at Texas A&M that I couldn't trust. I just know that I can trust Chris. I just know that. And as hard as that decision was, I could not walk away from it.
You walked away real quick, my guy.